Number 45 in our countdown, we have Burnin Rubber, developed by Harlequin and published by Ocean, released in 1993. Yes, before the game has even begun, we are faced with a demo sequence made up to look like something from Nine Fingers Spaceballs demos, and taking on the music of the time, the great Utah Saints. Pleasure of working with the Utah Saints, and I asked them specifically about this game, and unfortunately they had never heard of it, so they actually used this music and it was unlicensed. Pressing the fire button will give us the main menu, and from here we can change our control mode, selecting either automatic or the manual gearbox, and we can also use the joystick or the keyboard. So of course I will select the joystick, and I will select actually the automatic controls for this, and then that saves us messing around with the gears. We also find 3 difficulty modes. We'll leave that on medium for now, and just like the Lotus series, we get to mess around with the radio. We have sound effects and music in this game. From here we can choose our selection of music, including rock tracks and dance tracks. And then clicking on start, we get to choose our ride. Because this was released in 1993, we'll find a selection of 90s cars, and hopefully we'll find something with a little more horsepower. And we get to see a graphical representation of all those cars, and a few stats as well. But for this, let's not choose the small stats, let's go for something a little more beefy. Next, we get to spend any spare money on the upgrades, and of course the usual upgrades are on offer. It's just that we have front and rear tyres, and it looks like different parts of an engine that we have to buy separately, and you can see brakes, and we can move through those. The tyres are pretty expensive at 3,000, so let's buy some of those, and that means that we cannot afford most of the rest. So hopefully you can see super turbocharger and super engines there, super exhausts. There's a lot to buy in this shop, and that's certainly an upgrade from the Lotus series. But we can't seem to afford anything, and we can't affect anything on the screen, so let's just find somehow to exit. And well, there is an exit there in the top right corner. After more presentation, we find ourselves at the map screen. From here we have to plot our way from A to B, and we have to make junctions, so sometimes it's best to avoid major junctions. You can see if we move to the right first of all from the start point, and then take the first right after that, then the first right after that, then we'll be towards the exit. In Burnin Rubber, we have to make our way from point A to point B, not against the clock. As you can see, that time is ticking upwards, but we have to compete against 8 other competitors on various races across various locations around the world. We find ourselves first of all in Scotland, and you can see representative trees and sky, and we can also see changes in the landscape as we go through different areas. And as we move through the game, we'll also find junctions, and it's important to take those junctions. Of course, the first right was right, but unfortunately didn't manage to slow that car down quickly enough. And in this game you really have to slam on and prepare for those junctions, exactly like Cisco Heat that we reviewed in the top 10 worst games of all time. And you can see this game is quite sadly along those lines unless you have a really good set of tyres and a really good car. And this car, although it is quick, it is very difficult to control. Let's slam on again and miss that junction yet again. Now we find the police on our tail, and we already have 45% damage, and we haven't actually managed to get to the correct turning yet. Let's try to, well, avoid sinking in that river and floating away, and let's try to avoid those chevrons. Keep this thing planted on that tarmac, and somewhere ahead, yet again, there'll be another junction in the road that we have to make, and if that cop busts us, well, we'll be out of that race. So just like Europa that we reviewed, we have to avoid the cops, and we have to get around the traffic. Slowing down to an absolute grind, we managed to make that turn, and it's a pity that those turns are very difficult, just like Cisco Heat, and that's the one thing which spoils this game. The controls are also tricky to master, and this car won't stick like glue to the road, not like the Lotus series, and you can see we're also on 99% damage, so if I hit one more thing, then that's us over. So I think this game has potential as a very fast racing game, and perhaps a rallying game as well, plodding your way around that landscape, and the speed isn't bad, and I do like the soundtracks and the presentation screens endlessly until you get to that main game. I also like the fact that the landscape changes on the fly and there's no loading, but of course those are just colour changes, and so this game has great potential. It's just that it has a very demo-like feel when the player manages to crash off, and so currently this game has a 53% rating on the Lemon Amiga database.
Game by Light Shop Software.
Another title with a long introduction sequence is Black Viper, released in 1996, developed by Lightshock Software and published by Neo. And as you can see, the introduction has some great music and some great atmospheric effects going on, but of course great introductions don't really make a great game. Game we play as a Mad Max character from the year 2161, and the introduction speaks of war and ravages as it would do, and we can hopefully press the fire button to skip the introduction and the long text which then unfolds the story, and of course you can read that story yourself, and that leads on to more titles and more story. Let's press fire again. Let's try to get somewhere near the titles of this game, and it really does take some loading as well. As the titles roll, we will get to see something that looks quite a lot like Street Hawk, a direct rip-off from the Street Hawk design. And in this game we play as a rider on a bike, and it's our job of course to blast everything in our way. After a few more stats we can also check out the options, and we can also check out the high scores as well, but let's not bother with that. And next up we get a map, and we'll have to make our way through this series of stages in order to complete that game. And of course we get to switch off that sound effects and switch off the music as well if we like, and choose from a range of soundtracks. Black Viper is a very smooth Lotus type racer in which we have to blow away trucks, which should be indicated once we catch up to those. And you can see some old timer vehicles as well. And I think this is the AGA version, which I'm actually playing at the moment. There isn't too much difference between the ECS and the AGA version, except for a little more texturing on the graphics, particularly on that main rider, and the smoothness and the presentation is almost identical. Just like Burnin Rubber, we'll also take damage if we take too many hits. We have an unlimited supply of ammo, and we also have a counter which gives us the time remaining. You see it's ticking down, and I have 70 seconds remaining to complete this stage, and our progress along the stage is on the bottom of the screen. That's currently close to 40%, or well, it would be if I didn't keep crashing. And our main weapon is the guns, you can see at the very top. Heading midway through that stage, we are now over the 50% mark, but we are also rapidly approaching, well, I've just picked up a heart there, but we were rapidly approaching the 50% damage. And so it's very easy to accumulate damage when all you want to do is battle down this road like a revenged maniac and blow away as many of these bland looking cars, which actually merge into the background, as much as possible. I think the music is well done in this game, and certainly there is some atmosphere there. The shooting, fighting, blasting action is yet again better than Roll Blasters, and that's certainly not a game that we'll be covering in this top 50, and I think this game had potential. The controls are a lot better than Burnin Rubber, and we can actually stick to that tarmac, but unfortunately chasing the percentages around that screen, we completed 91%, but we had 100% damage trying to do it. So it's not easy, and the player really does have to practice this game to get any further, but as you can see, just like Agony, we have some amazing still screenshots and a very long storyline to go with it. Though this game had potential, it only scored 54% on the Lemon database, and the AGA version got 65%. No idea why, because these games are identical. Number 43, we find XTreme Racing, developed by Tuna Software and published by Blackmagic in 1995. So yet again late in the Amiga's development, but you can see it's more or less some kind of a homebrew which has been improved and been released commercially. And Blackmagic Software, most famous for Mark Sibley and the Gloom games, which we will get to in this series. But for now, let's check out this racer. From the options screen, we can set up and connect a number of computers together, and we can select a number of game modes. Up to 4 players can play this game, and a number of cups and leagues to choose from as well, and we also get to change our ride and things like that. So let's just select something at random just for this playthrough, and then we get to choose from our character selection screen, and every character has a different ride. And for this one, I will select this one who looks like he's pretty much got the Batmobile. Before each level, we can also see an overhead view of that if we press the appropriate blue button, which is actually green on our screen, and that's because these buttons are mapped to the CD32 controller, and I'm using a variant of that at the moment. Let's move on to the game itself.
3, 2, 1, go!
much like Super Mario Kart, we get to race around a 3D landscape, and it looks like Mode 7 has been created on the Amiga. You can see that we have turbo zones and pick up some power-ups that we can use, and you can also see that actually handling this game is pretty difficult at the best of times. Even though this is a basic figure of 8, it's pretty easy to lose our way around that thing, and you've no idea whether you've just missed or skipped a junction going through that, and on the later levels it's even easier to lose your way around. As this is an AGA release, we get to see a great textured landscape, and we get to see a nice sky and things on the horizon. Everything moves smoothly enough, it's just that the game itself is a little bit unwieldy and far too unplayable to be really great, and it's unfortunate that we didn't get Mario Kart and F-Zero on the Amiga, when of course it was entirely possible. But you can see it is capable of jumping high speed action. It's just that in this case, for whatever reason, the game is difficult. So that has an average score at the moment of 83% on the Lemon Amiga database, but I marked that down into this spot because of the poll, which complained of course that it's pretty darn difficult. You may remember Street Racer from the Amiga Games You've Probably Never Heard Of series, and it appears at 42 in this collection. It was developed by Ubisoft's Vivid Image label and published by Guildhall in 1997. So once again, very much late in the Amiga's life cycle, 1997, but it was published and it was produced. So you can see that we've covered this game already. It includes a variety of landscapes, and they start off pretty easy and get more difficult. You can take shortcuts, and you can also use different effects, and in this case magic spells, depending on the character that you choose, and this character's magic spell means I can fly over all these opponents. You'll also find sticks of dynamite on every level, and as they get stuck on that vehicle then they'll blow it up after a while, but we can tag other vehicles while we have that dynamite, and that will pass that on, and then they will blow up. And we only made third in that level, unfortunately, but we have to make at least third to pass on to the next section, and anywhere in the top 3 is good enough. Of course, number 1 will give us the most points. The player has to press fire at the appropriate point as soon as those lights hit green, and then hopefully they will get a great start. And they can have a great start if they hold down and press that fire just before the lights, but if you're holding down that fire as the lights go red, then unfortunately you'll probably have a slow start over the rest, and you'll simply get wheel spin just like this, and you'll end up at the back of the pack. But you can actually get far in this game pretty quickly, and it doesn't really take long to get to the front. I also appreciate this great music as well, and it's also jolly to have what looks like a motorway, at least a 3-lane highway that we can zoom down at high speed, and it's not also assured that we'll actually win that race. Those game competitors are actually pretty good, and we'll have to pull out all the stops, including giving them some dynamite and using our flying abilities to get through these levels. After a selection of random bonus points are also handed out, which is another great feature, we move on to the sands of Sydney Harbour, where we get to race another fiendish track against all those other opponents. Like other games that we've seen, we will not sink into the water, which is great, and those life belts are there simply as a red herring, but we can hit those boulders and those rocks sticking out, and if we hit those, obviously we'll have to slow down, but that's not too difficult at this stage, and it's a very easy stage to get into, and that leads of course to fast, furious action, which is the best part of a game like this. With good controls and preemptive steering around all these corners, then the game does become very fun and playable, and I do rate this game highly. I apologise for the sound glitches which you heard in this part of the review, but you can hear it's great music and it's a great atmosphere, and it even gives the player different seasons to practice, and at the moment we are on the easy season, and that means that we've completed it, and at the end we gain at the first place on the podium, which is also great. But unfortunately this only scored 56% currently on the Lemon Amiga database. Yes, it's the moment you've all been waiting for. At 41 in our countdown we find Chase HQ, developed by Legendary Tech Software and published by Ocean in 1988.
This is Nancy at Chase headquarters. We've got an emergency here.
After a funky introduction and a chat with Nancy over at police headquarters, we get to drive off at high speed in what looks like a Porsche, and we get to drive with our co-driver who has to shoot down the bad guys later on, and the point of this game is to chase the bad guys halfway across town, and once you catch up to those you can simply ram those guys off the road or fire bullets into those in the sequel Chase HQ2. And as we shall see, we have to drive very cautiously down this road because one off means that we crash and we spend lots of time having to catch up. Luckily we have turbos and you can press the space bar at any point to launch those turbos, and that means that we get to catch up all that missing time that we lost with all these offs. Unfortunately, using the turbos just at the wrong point will lead to an even bigger delay, and even bigger delays is the core subject of this game, because it's really slow unless you have the turbo on full whack, and ordinarily the controls are really unresponsive and the car slip slides around the road more or less like it's skating on a frozen lake. So you can see I'm trying to turn there, but the car simply will not allow it, and eventually we managed to get off that grass and make it to the first criminal. The levels in the game are very easy to get through despite all these offs, and it's actually quite fun, and quite so much more fun than the Commodore 64 version, and so it won't be long before we take down that guy. And of course bashing that guy off the road has never been greater fun, because we don't have to spend lots of credits pumping away to try to get there. But unlike the arcade, it's a different experience. I must admit, I don't really like Chase HQ, one, because you can't really go around any corners without crashing off, and for the second reason, the Commodore 64 version was so dire it put me off this game for life. And apparently there are some good versions of Chase HQ out there, and as we covered in Batman, this game engine was used in the driving section of Batman, very much more enhanced. And so once again, although this had potential, I think they did a better job of the sequel, which we shall see later on. It's also a not bad feeling when we take down that criminal and we are given a cutscene as well.
You're under arrest.
And then it's on eventually to the next virtually unplayable stage in the game after a few bonuses have been handed out.
This is Nancy at Sept's headquarters. We've got an emergency here.
Let's get him.
At the time, I also liked those great voice sound effects, and let's go, Mr. Driver, and let's get him, and all that kind of thing. It's very atmospheric and reminded me of the arcade, but unfortunately there are just too many things which spoil this, and that's why it only scored 56% on the Amiga database.